When I woke up after 6 months in a coma, the first thing I saw wasn't the hospital ceiling. It was my husband kissing another woman right beside my bed. I couldn't move, I couldn't speak, but I could hear everything. "Not now," he whispered, pulling away too late. She glanced at me calm, almost annoyed. "You said she wouldn't wake up yet." My heart started racing, trapped inside a body that refused to respond. In that moment, I realized something far worse than betrayal. I had woken up in the middle of a plan I was never meant to survive. If this story already has you feeling something, stay with me. And tell me, what would you do if you woke up to this? Where are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? I read every comment. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe some truths deserve to be told. I wish I could tell you that everything became clear after that moment. It didn't. Clarity didn't come like a light switching on. It came in fragments, slow, disjointed, and often painful, like trying to piece together a shattered mirror while still lying inside it. At first, I wasn't even sure how long I had been gone. Time felt distorted. I would drift in and out of awareness sometimes, hearing voices as if they were underwater, sometimes feeling hands move my arms or adjust the sheets beneath me. My body didn't belong to me yet. It was heavy, distant, unresponsive. But my mind was waking up faster than anyone expected, faster than my husband expected. The nurses spoke in careful tones whenever they thought I was asleep. "She's showing stronger responses today. Let's keep stimulation minimal." Family's been very involved, husband especially. That last part always came with a certain softness, almost admiration. If only they knew. Richard was always there when others were watching, holding my hand, leaning close, speaking in a gentle, practiced voice. "Valentina, sweetheart, if you can hear me, I'm right here. I never left you. It would have been comforting if I hadn't already seen the truth with my own eyes and heard it. That whisper, that sentence. She wasn't supposed to wake up yet. Every time he spoke like that, something inside me tightened instead of softened. Because now I knew whatever version of my husband everyone else saw, it wasn't the full picture, not even close. It was 3 days before I was able to open my eyes long enough for anyone to notice. I remember the moment clearly. A nurse named Carla was adjusting my IV when I forced my eyelids open just enough to let the light in. Her gasp was immediate. "Oh my God, Valentina, can you hear me?" I couldn't answer. But I blinked. Once. That was enough to send the room into motion. Doctors rushed in. Machines were checked. Lights were shined into my eyes. And then just like that, the narrative changed. "She's coming out of it. It's a good sign. We need to monitor cognitive response." And suddenly, I wasn't just a patient anymore. I was a miracle. Richard arrived less than an hour later. I could tell by the shift in the room before I even saw him. The nurses straightened. The tone softened. The devoted husband had entered. He moved quickly to my bedside, his face already arranged into that familiar expression of relief and love. "Valentina." His voice trembled, but not in the way it used to. This felt measured. "Oh my God, you're back." Back. Such a simple word, but something about the way he said it made it feel like I had returned somewhere I wasn't expected to be. His hand wrapped around mine, warm and steady, too steady. I watched him carefully, even though my vision was still blurry. I wanted to see something, anything that looked like genuine shock, relief, joy. But what I saw instead was something else. Tension. Subtle, controlled, but unmistakable. His eyes flicked briefly toward the door before returning to me, as if checking who might be watching, as if calculating. "I knew you'd come back to me," he said softly, leaning closer. But his grip tightened just a little too much. Not affection, control. Emily came later that evening. My daughter, my baby. Even at 32, she still looked like the girl who used to run into my arms after school. Her hair tangled, her smile wide and unguarded. But the woman who stood in the doorway that night, she hesitated. Just for a second, like she wasn't sure how to approach me. That hesitation hurt more than anything else I had experienced so far. "Mom," she said, gently stepping closer. I blinked again, trying to focus on her face. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You're awake," she added, as if confirming it to herself more than to me. She took my hand, but her touch felt careful, not distant, not cold, but restrained, like she was holding back something. "Dad told me you might respond soon," she said. "He's been incredible through all of this." There it was. That word again, incredible. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her what I saw, what I heard, but my body betrayed me. All I could do was lie there, trapped inside silence. She kept talking about the accident, about how scared she had been, about how Richard never left my side. Every sentence felt rehearsed, not robotic, but practiced, as if she had told this story so many times it had become the version she believed, or the version she had been given. That night, I didn't sleep, not really. My body rested, but my mind stayed awake, replaying everything over and over again. The kiss, the whisper, Emily's hesitation, Richard's tension. Something wasn't right, and it wasn't just emotional, it was structural. Like pieces of my life had been quietly rearranged while I was gone. The next morning, I pushed myself further. I focused on small movements, a finger, a slight turn of my head. The doctors were encouraged. Excellent progress. She's regaining motor response quickly, too quickly. I saw the flicker in Richard's eyes again when they said that. Not pride, not relief, concern. Later that afternoon, 2 nurses stood just outside my room speaking in low voices. They thought I was asleep. "She's doing better than expected." Yeah. But the husband seemed surprised. Surprised. Why a pause? I don't know. Just something in his reaction. I held on to that moment like a lifeline, because it wasn't just me. Someone else saw it too. By the 5th day, I could open my eyes fully. By the 6th, I could form sounds. By the 7th, I spoke my first word, water. It came out rough, barely audible, but it changed everything, because now I wasn't just observing. I was entering the conversation, and I had to be careful, very careful, because I didn't know who I could trust. That evening, Richard leaned close again, his voice soft. "You're doing amazing, Valentina. We're going to get through this together." I looked at him, really looked this time, at the man I had shared decades with, the man everyone believed was my anchor. And I made a decision right then. I let my eyes soften, let my expression remain fragile, let my voice stay weak. "I'm tired," I whispered. He nodded quickly. "Of course you are. Don't push yourself." He kissed my forehead, and for the first time in our entire marriage, it felt like a stranger touching me, because now I understood something I didn't when I first woke up. The danger wasn't just what I saw. It was what I didn't know yet. And until I knew everything, I would pretend, I would watch, I would listen. Because whatever plan they thought had already succeeded. It wasn't over. Not yet. By the 8th day, I had learned something more valuable than strength. I had learned control, not over my body, not yet. That was still returning in slow, frustrating increments, but control over how I was perceived, over what people believed I understood. And that was power. So I kept pretending. I let my words come out slow and uncertain. I let my gaze drift just slightly off-center when someone spoke as if I were still struggling to process simple things. I asked small, harmless questions. What day is it? Did I fall nothing too sharp, nothing too aware? And they believed it. All of them. Except maybe Richard. Clara entered my room again on the 9th morning. This time I was fully awake, fully aware, and fully watching. She knocked lightly before stepping inside, but she didn't wait for permission. That alone told me more than any introduction could. She moved like someone who already belonged there, mid-40s, polished, composed, the kind of woman who knew exactly how she was perceived and used it. "Good morning, Valentina," she said, smoothly, offering a warm smile that never quite reached her eyes. "It's nice to finally meet you properly." Properly, as if we hadn't already met in a moment she thought I would never remember. I let my eyes linger on her, then flicker slightly as if I were trying to place her. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Have we met?" Her smile didn't falter. "I've been part of your recovery team," she said gently. "Clara Whitmore. I've been helping coordinate your rehabilitation plan. Rehabilitation. Such a clean professional word. It almost made me doubt myself. Almost. Richard stepped in just behind her, his presence filling the space with familiar tension. She's been incredible, Valentina, he added quickly. I don't know what we would have done without her. There it was again. That same word. Incredible. I lowered my gaze, nodding faintly. Thank you, I murmured. Clara stepped closer to the bed, her eyes scanning me not like a caregiver assessing a patient, but like someone evaluating progress toward a goal. How are you feeling today? She asked. Better, I said slowly. Still confused. That part wasn't entirely a lie. She nodded as if that answer satisfied her. That's completely normal. Cognitive clarity takes time. We don't want to overwhelm you too quickly. Her tone was soothing, measured, but there was something underneath it, something controlled, as if she were guiding not just my recovery, but the pace of what I was allowed to understand. Over the next few days, Clara became a constant presence. Too constant. She wasn't just checking on my physical progress. She was involved in conversations that didn't seem to belong to her. Financial discussions with Richard, phone calls taken just outside my door, quiet exchanges that stopped the moment I showed signs of awareness, and every time she would turn back to me with that same composed smile, as if nothing had happened. On the 11th day, I heard something I wasn't supposed to. It was early. The kind of early where the hospital hallways are quieter, the lights softer, the world not fully awake yet. I kept my eyes closed, breathing slow, even listening. The door opened, soft footsteps, 2 voices. Clara. Richard? We're running out of time, Clara said in a low, controlled tone. My heart started pounding instantly. I know, Richard replied, but she's not as far along as we thought. A pause. She's improving faster than expected, Clara said. That's a problem. Problem. The word echoed in my mind like a warning. She still seems confused, Richard added. She's not putting things together. Not yet, I thought. Clara didn't respond immediately. I could feel her presence shift closer to the bed, closer to me. I forced every muscle in my body to remain still. You need to move forward with the paperwork, she said finally, before her cognitive evaluation changes the recommendation. Paperwork, again. What about Emily? Richard asked. My chest tightened. She'll stay cooperative, Clara replied calmly. She trusts you. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything else. Then Richard exhaled slowly. All right, I'll handle it. Their footsteps moved away. The door closed, and I lay there, completely still, staring into the darkness behind my eyelids. Because now I knew. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was strategy. Later that day, I let myself be more responsive, just enough. I followed simple commands, answered basic questions, and watched. Always watched. Clara returned in the afternoon, clipboard in hand. Let's try something new today, she said brightly. I'd like to assess your memory recall. I nodded weakly. She asked me questions about my childhood, my business, my marriage. I answered carefully, sometimes correctly, sometimes with slight hesitation, sometimes pretending not to remember at all, because I needed her to believe I was still fragile, still manageable, still controllable. Good, she said after a while. You're making progress. But her eyes said something different. They said she was measuring risk. That evening, Richard sat beside me again, holding my hand, playing his role. You're doing so well, he said softly. Everyone's impressed. I looked at him, letting my expression stay gentle, trusting. I don't remember everything, I whispered. He smiled, almost relieved. That's okay, he said quickly. There's no rush, except there was. I could feel it now, in every glance, every conversation, every carefully chosen word. They were working against time, and time was no longer on their side. When he left the room, I turned my head slightly toward the window. The city outside looked the same. Cars moving, people walking, life continuing, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. Because somewhere between that accident and this hospital bed, my life had been rewritten, my voice taken, my reality reshaped, and the people I trusted most had been part of it. I closed my eyes slowly, not to sleep, but to think, to plan, to prepare. because now I understood the most important thing of all. They didn't know what I knew, and that was my advantage. By the time they discharged me, everyone kept calling it a miracle. I smiled when they said it, nodded, whispered thank you, but inside I knew better. Miracles don't come with whispers in the dark. Miracles don't come with hidden paperwork and careful glances. Miracles don't feel like walking back into a life that no longer belongs to you. The ride home was quiet. Richard insisted on driving himself. No need for a car service, he told the nurse, smiling politely. I've got her. Of course he did. He always had me, or at least that's what everyone believed. I sat in the passenger seat, my body still weak, but my mind sharper than it had been in months. The city passed by outside the window. Savannah's familiar streets, the oak trees, the soft southern light. Everything looked the same, but I didn't feel the same. I studied Richard from the corner of my eye. His hands were steady on the wheel, his posture relaxed, too relaxed, like someone who believed the situation was still under control. You okay? He asked without looking at me. I hesitated just long enough to seem uncertain. I think so, I said softly. He nodded satisfied. Just take it slow, he replied. You've been through a lot. Yes, I had. More than he realized. When we pulled into the driveway, my chest tightened. It was my house, the same white exterior, the same porch I had decorated every spring, the same windows I used to open in the mornings, but something felt off. I couldn't explain it at first, not until I stepped inside. The smell was different, subtle but wrong. My home used to carry traces of lavender and lemon, the cleaning oils I always used, the candles I loved. Now it smelled neutral, generic, like a hotel trying to imitate comfort. I paused just inside the doorway, letting my eyes adjust, and that's when I saw it. The furniture. It had been rearranged. Not drastically, but enough. The sofa was angled differently. The side tables were new. The artwork on the walls had changed. My home had been edited. Carefully, deliberately. You like it? Richard asked casually behind me. I thought a few updates might feel refreshing. I forced a small smile. It's nice, I said. But my voice felt hollow even to me. Because this wasn't an update, it was a replacement. I moved slowly through the living room, taking everything in. Every detail felt like a quiet erasure, as if the version of me that used to live here had been gently removed. Not violently, not obviously. Just gone. Come sit, Richard said, guiding me toward the couch. You shouldn't overdo it. I let him help me. For now, because I needed to see more. Emily arrived an hour later. She walked in quickly, her eyes immediately finding me. Mom, she said, her voice soft with something that sounded like relief. Real relief, not practiced, not controlled. She came closer, kneeling slightly in front of me. You're home, she added, as if that alone meant everything was okay. I reached for her hand. This time she didn't hesitate, but something still lingered beneath the surface. Something unresolved. I missed you, I whispered. Her expression shifted, guilt, maybe. I missed you too, she said quickly, too quickly. Dinner that night felt staged. Richard insisted we eat together. Like normal, he said, but nothing about it felt normal. The kitchen had changed too. New dishes, different layout. Even the lighting felt colder. I sat at the table watching them, listening, learning. Emily talked about work, about friends, about small, safe things. Richard filled in the gaps, answered questions before I could ask them, guided the conversation away from anything real. How's the business? I asked suddenly. The room went still, just for a second, but it was enough. Richard smiled, calm, controlled. It's fine, he said. Everything's been handled. Handled. I turned to Emily. And you, I asked. You've been helping. She glanced at Richard before answering. A little, she said. Just supporting Dad. Supporting. Another careful word. I'd like to see the office tomorrow, I said softly. Richard's smile didn't change, but something behind it did. Let's not rush, he replied gently. You need to focus on your recovery first. There it was again. Control, disguised as care. Later that night, I found my first real answer, and my first real confirmation. I woke up sometime after midnight. The house was quiet, too quiet. I turned my head slowly, adjusting to the darkness, and that's when I noticed it. The door at the end of the hallway. My office. Closed, locked. I knew it without even trying the handle, because that door had never been locked before. Not once in all the years I had lived there. Not even when we traveled. Not even when we had guests. That room was my space, my work, my life, and now it was sealed off. The next morning I tested it. Carefully, slowly. I made my way down the hallway, my steps still unsteady but determined. I reached for the handle, turned it, locked, of course. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door, at the boundary, at the line that had been drawn while I was gone. "What are you doing?" Richard's voice came from behind me. I turned slowly, letting surprise flicker across my face. "I was just looking," I said. He stepped closer. Too close. "That room's a mess right now," he said smoothly. "I've been reorganizing things. Reorganizing." "Can I see?" I asked. A simple question, but it changed everything. Because for the first time, he hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but I saw it. "No," he said finally, his tone still gentle but firmer now. "Not yet, not yet, not ever," I thought. That was the moment I stopped doubting myself. Completely. Because everything I had felt, everything I had suspected, was real. They had changed my life while I was unconscious, and they were still trying to control what I saw, what I knew, what I remembered. That afternoon, while Richard was out and Emily was upstairs, I made my move, a small one, but necessary. I found the drawer in the guest room where old electronics were kept, chargers, spare cables, and buried beneath them, an old phone. Mine. Not the one Richard had been giving me to use, a different one, older but functional. My heart started racing as I powered it on. "Please work. Please." The screen flickered, then lit up. Still alive, still mine. My hands trembled as I scrolled through my contacts. So many names, so many pieces of my life, but I only needed one. Judith Carter, my attorney, my friend, the one person Richard wouldn't expect me to reach. I stared at her name for a moment, then pressed call. The line rang once, twice, then Valentina. Her voice, sharp, alert, relieved. I closed my eyes for a brief second. "It's me," I whispered. Silence. "Then where are you?" "At home," I said. "But something's wrong." A pause. Then her voice dropped lower. "Serious. Tell me everything." And for the first time since I woke up, I wasn't alone anymore. That evening, after I ended the call and hid the phone again, I sat quietly in the living room as Richard returned home. He smiled, asked how I was feeling, played his part perfectly, and I played mine. Weak, grateful, unaware. Because now the game had changed. He thought he was still in control. He thought I was still catching up. He thought I was still behind. But he was wrong. Because now, I had someone on the outside, and whatever he had done while I couldn't speak was about to come into the light. The next 48 hours felt like standing on the edge of something invisible, not falling, not moving, just waiting, for the ground beneath me to either hold or collapse completely. I didn't hear back from Judith immediately. At first, that terrified me. Had something happened? Had Richard already anticipated this? Had he cut me off for more than I realized? But then I forced myself to breathe. Judith Carter was not the kind of woman who reacted impulsively. She was careful, precise, strategic. If she hadn't called back, it meant she was already doing something. And that thought steadied me. I continued playing my role, fragile, recovering, uninformed. I let Richard guide my routine, accepted his help, even thanked him when he brought me tea or adjusted the blanket over my legs. Every performance felt like swallowing glass, but I did it because I needed him comfortable. I needed him careless. Clara came by that afternoon, unannounced, again. She walked in with that same controlled confidence, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor like she owned the rhythm of the house. "How are we feeling today?" she asked, setting her bag down casually on the side table. We, always we, as if she had a claim in my recovery. "I'm okay," I said quietly, letting my voice carry just a hint of strain. She studied me for a moment, too closely, too carefully. Then she smiled. Good, she said. Consistency is important. Her eyes flicked briefly toward the hallway, checking, measuring. Richard told me you've been asking about the office, she added lightly. There it was. Information flow. Nothing I said stayed contained. I was just curious, I replied. I don't remember much. She nodded slowly as if that answer aligned perfectly with what she wanted. That's understandable, she said. Sometimes it's better not to rush into things that could overwhelm you. Her words were gentle, but the message was clear. Stay away. That night, Judith finally called. I was in the bathroom when my hidden phone vibrated softly against the towel drawer. I locked the door before answering. Judith. I've been looking into things all day, she said without greeting. Valentina. You need to listen carefully. My grip tightened on the phone. I'm listening. A pause. Then your husband filed emergency management authority over your estate and business 4 months ago. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? I whispered. It means he legally positioned himself as decision maker while you were incapacitated, she said. Medical justification. Temporary in theory. In theory, I repeated. Another pause. There are documents, she continued, with your signature authorizing extended control. Asset restructuring. Pending transfers tied to something labeled a future care trust. My entire body went cold. I didn't sign anything I said. I know, Judith replied quietly. That's why I'm concerned. Concerned. That word didn't feel strong enough. What happens if those documents go through, I asked. Her answer came without hesitation. You could lose effective control of your company, permanently. The room seemed to tilt. And the house, I asked. Also vulnerable, she said, depending on how assets were categorized. I closed my eyes, steadying myself against the sink. How soon, I whispered. That's the part that worries me most, Judith said. Some of these filings are nearing activation. Days. Maybe less. Days. Not months. Not weeks. Days. After I hung up, I stayed in the bathroom longer than necessary. Not because I was afraid, but because I needed to feel the anger fully. Not panic, not fear, anger, cold, focused, sharp. Because now I knew exactly what this was. This wasn't just betrayal, this was erasure. They weren't just trying to replace me, they were trying to remove me, legally, permanently. The next morning I changed something, just slightly, just enough. I became a little more present, a little more responsive. I asked 1 or 2 extra questions. I held eye contact a second longer, and I watched. Richard noticed immediately. You seem better today, he said carefully. I feel clearer, I replied. There it was, a test. His reaction was subtle, but I caught it. A flicker of something behind his smile. Not joy, not relief, concern, again. You don't need to push yourself, he said quickly. Recovery isn't linear. I nodded, lowering my gaze as if I were still unsure. I just want to understand things, I murmured. You will, he said. In time, time. The one thing he didn't want me to have. Clara returned that afternoon. Of course she did. She always seemed to arrive when something shifted. I hear you're making progress, she said, her tone pleasant but her eyes alert. I think so, I replied. She stepped closer, studying me again. Assessing. Always assessing. That's good, she said. But we need to be careful about cognitive strain. Cognitive strain. Another way of saying, don't think too much. I understand, I said softly. But inside I was already several steps ahead. That evening I overheard something else. Not by accident this time, on purpose. I had positioned myself in the living room, eyes half closed, body relaxed, listening, waiting. Richard's voice came from the kitchen. Low, tense. It needs to be finalized this week, he said. Clara's voice followed, sharp, controlled. Then stop delaying, she replied. You're the one hesitating. I'm not hesitating, he snapped quietly. I'm being careful. A pause. Then Clara again. Careful doesn't help us if she regains full capacity before the recommendation is submitted. My breath caught. Recommendation, medical, legal. Everything was connected. She's still confused, Richard said. You've seen it. Yes, Clara replied, but not enough. Silence. Then. You need the signature, she said, or at least the appearance of it. My heart started pounding. louder, faster, but I didn't move, didn't react, because now I had something. Not proof yet, but direction, intent. Later that night, Richard sat beside me again. Close. Too close. "You're doing so well," he said softly. "I'm proud of you." I turned my head slowly, meeting his eyes, and for the first time, I let a different kind of awareness flicker there, just for a second. Then I softened it again. "I couldn't have done it without you," I whispered. He smiled, relaxed, because he believed it, because he needed to believe it. But inside, everything had shifted, because now I understood the timeline, the urgency, the stakes. They weren't just preparing, they were rushing. And that meant one thing. They were afraid. Afraid I would catch up. Afraid I would remember. Afraid I would stop them. And they were right. Because I wasn't the woman they thought I was anymore. Not the one lying unconscious. Not the one being spoken about like a problem. Not the one being quietly replaced. I was awake now. Fully, completely. And whatever they had started, I was going to finish. On my terms. Once you realize your life may have been deliberately altered, you stop seeing things the same way. Details that once felt insignificant begin to sharpen. Memories you trusted start to fracture, and questions you never thought to ask suddenly become impossible to ignore. That's where I found myself on the 6th day back home. Not recovering, not adjusting, investigating. It started with the accident, because everything seemed to lead back to it. 6 months ago, I had left the office late. I remember that much now. The sky had been heavy with rain, the kind that turned the streets slick and reflective under streetlights. I had stayed behind to review some financial reports numbers that didn't quite add up. That detail came back to me slowly. At first, just a feeling, then a fragment, then a moment clear enough to make my chest tighten. I had been sitting at my desk staring at a series of withdrawals I didn't recognize. Transfers that had been approved under Richard's authority, larger than usual, more frequent, hidden within legitimate transactions. I had called him that night. I remembered that now, clearly. Richard, I had said, trying to keep my voice calm, we need to talk about some of these accounts. There had been a pause. Too long. What accounts, he asked, but I could hear it. That shift, that careful tone. The secondary development fund, I replied. There are transfers I don't recognize. Another pause. Then I'll explain when you get home, he said. Not defensive, not concerned, controlled. That was the last conversation we had before the accident. The official report said it was brake failure. A mechanical issue, unfortunate timing, rain-slick roads, nothing suspicious. That's what everyone believed. That's what Emily believed. That's what Richard told everyone. But now I wasn't so sure. Judith called me early that morning. I've started digging into the accident records, she said. And Valentina, there are inconsistencies. My grip tightened around the phone. What kind of inconsistencies? A delay in the maintenance report, she replied. Your car had been serviced 2 weeks before the accident. Everything was cleared. No issues. And after the crash, the report suddenly indicates brake system failure, she said. But the documentation between those 2 points is incomplete. Incomplete. That doesn't prove anything, I said carefully. No, Judith agreed, but it raises questions. Questions. That was enough. For now, she continued. I want you to focus on something else. What your memory, she said. Anything unusual before the accident. Conversations, tension, financial concerns. I closed my eyes, letting the fragments come back, the reports, the call, the pause in his voice. I think I was about to confront him, I said slowly. Judith didn't respond immediately. Then, that aligns with what I'm seeing, she said. A chill ran through me. Valentina, you need to consider the possibility that what happened wasn't entirely accidental. The words hung in the air, heavy, unavoidable. I don't have proof, she added quickly. Not yet, but you need to be aware. Aware. I already was. That afternoon, I pushed myself further than I had before. Physically, mentally, emotionally. Because now it wasn't just about protecting what I had left. It was about understanding what had been taken. I asked Richard to take me outside just for a walk. Something simple, something normal. He agreed immediately. Too quickly. as if he wanted to show that everything was fine, that nothing had changed. The air felt different outside, sharper, cleaner, real. We walked slowly along the edge of the driveway, my arm resting lightly on his. "I've been thinking," I said casually. He glanced at me. "About what?" "The accident," I replied. His body tensed, just slightly, but I felt it. "They told me it was brake failure," I continued. "That's right," he said. "It was just bad luck." "Bad luck." I nodded. "Do you remember when the car was last serviced?" I asked. Another pause, short, controlled. "A couple weeks before," he said. "Why?" "No reason," I replied softly. "Just trying to remember things." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Don't push yourself too hard," he said. "Some things will come back naturally." Naturally, I almost smiled at the irony. That evening, Clara came by again, unannounced, as always, but this time I was ready for her. We sat in the living room while Richard stepped out to take a call. Alone, finally. "How are you feeling today?" she asked. "Better," I said. She studied me. "Longer than usual. You seem more present," she noted. There it was. Observation, assessment. I let my gaze drift slightly, softening my focus. "Some things are coming back," I admitted. Her posture shifted, subtle but real. "What kind of things?" she asked. "Little things," I said. "Work, the office, numbers." Numbers, that word landed. I saw it. Just for a second, a flicker in her eyes. Interest, concern. Gone almost immediately. "That's normal," she said smoothly. "Memory often returns in fragments." Fragments. Yes, I agreed. Sometimes in pieces that don't quite fit. She smiled, but this time it was tighter, more controlled. "Well," she said, standing up, "we'll make sure everything fits in time. Everything, not just memory. Everything." After she left, I sat in silence, thinking, connecting, building the picture. Because now I had something I didn't have before, a timeline, a pattern, a motive. Richard had been moving money before the accident. I had noticed. I had questioned him. And then the accident happened. Later that night, I found myself standing in front of the locked office again, staring at it, feeling the weight of everything behind that door. My work, my records, my proof, or maybe their manipulation. I reached out, rested my hand against the wood, and made a silent promise. Whatever was hidden in there, I would find it. Back in the bedroom, I lay awake long after the lights were off. Richard sleeping beside me, peaceful, unbothered, as if none of this existed. I turned my head slightly, watching him in the dim light. This man, this stranger, this person I had trusted with everything. And for the first time, I allowed myself to think the thought I had been avoiding. Not just betrayal, not just manipulation, but something darker, something more dangerous. Because if he had been willing to take everything from me while I couldn't speak, then what else was he capable of? I closed my eyes slowly. But sleep didn't come. Because now, the past wasn't just something I needed to remember. It was something I needed to survive. The confrontation with Emily was never going to be gentle. I knew that. But knowing something doesn't make it easier when the moment finally arrives. It only makes it inevitable. It happened 2 days after my conversation with Judith about the accident. Richard had left early that morning for a meeting. Clara hadn't appeared yet. The house was unusually quiet, like it was holding its breath. Emily was in the kitchen, standing by the counter with a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. I watched her for a moment from the hallway. My daughter, the girl I raised, the woman who now felt like someone standing just out of reach. "Emily," I said softly. She turned quickly, almost startled. "Mom, hey, you're up early." "I couldn't sleep," I replied. Stepping into the kitchen slowly, she nodded, but her eyes were already searching my face, measuring the same way Clara did. That realization cut deeper than I expected. "I wanted to talk to you," I said. Her grip tightened slightly around the mug. "About what?" "About everything," I answered. A pause. Then she set the mug down carefully. "Okay," she said, but her voice had changed, guarded. I moved closer, resting my hands lightly on the edge of the counter. "I've been trying to remember things I began." She nodded slowly. "That's good," she said. "The doctors said that would happen." "Yes," I replied, "and some things don't feel right." Her eyes flickered. What do you mean? I held her gaze. The house, I said, the office, the business. Everything feels different. She looked away first. It had to be, she said. Things couldn't just stay the same while you were gone. Gone. Not sick, not unconscious, gone. I understand that, I said carefully. But I need you to tell me the truth. Her shoulders stiffened. I am telling you the truth. No, I said quietly. You're telling me something. But it's not everything silence, heavy, uncomfortable. Then she exhaled sharply. What do you want me to say, Mom? She asked. I want to know what happened, I said, while I was in that hospital bed. Her jaw tightened. You were in a coma, she said. We thought we were going to lose you. But you didn't, I replied. And now I'm here. She looked back at me, then something flashing in her eyes. Yeah, she said, you are. The tone was wrong. Not relief. Something else. Something closer to frustration. I asked your father about the business, I continued. He said everything's been handled. It has, she said quickly. He kept everything running. At what cost, I asked. Her expression hardened. What is that supposed to mean? It means I want to know what decisions were made in my name, I said. You weren't able to make decisions, she snapped. That's the point. The words hit harder than I expected, not because they were cruel, but because they were rehearsed. That doesn't mean I stopped existing, I said quietly. Her eyes softened for a fraction of a second, then hardened again. No, she said. But things had to move forward, without me. I took a breath, steady, careful. Did I ever tell you I wanted to step away from the company, I asked? The question landed exactly where I wanted it to. She froze, just for a second. Then you talked about it, she said, when I pressed. A while ago, she replied. Before the accident, my heart started pounding. What did I say? She hesitated. Then that you were tired, she said, that maybe it was time to slow down. Tired, slow down, not the same as stepping away, not the same as giving everything up. Did I say I wanted to give control to your father, I asked. Her silence answered me before she did. I don't remember the exact words she said finally. Of course not. Because they weren't real. Emily, I said softly, look at me. She did, reluctantly. Do you believe I would walk away from everything I built without telling you clearly, I asked. Her eyes filled with something confusion, maybe. Doubt. I don't know, she said. You were different before the accident, different. There it was. How I asked. She swallowed. You were forgetting things, she said, repeating yourself. Dad was worried. My chest tightened. He said you were declining. The word hit me like a physical blow, because now I understood. This wasn't just about control, it was about narrative. Richard hadn't just taken my power. He had rewritten who I was. I wasn't declining, I said quietly. You don't know that, she replied quickly. Yes, I said, my voice firmer now. I do. She shook her head. You don't remember everything she said. You can't be sure. I remember enough, I said. Do you? She challenged. The question hung between us. Sharp. Dangerous. Because she wasn't just defending him, she was defending the version of reality she had been given. The version she had chosen to believe. I stepped closer. Close enough that she couldn't avoid me. Let me ask you something, I said. Her eyes flickered with uncertainty. Okay? Did you ever see Clara here, I asked. The reaction was immediate, too immediate. Her entire body stiffened. Why would you ask that, she said. Because I already knew. But I needed to hear it from her. Just answer me, I said. A long pause. Then yes, she said quietly. When I pressed, while you were in the hospital, she replied. How often? Another pause. I don't know, she said. A few times, at night while I lay unconscious. And what was she doing here, I asked. Her eyes dropped. Talking to Dad, she said. About what I don't know, she said quickly. Work, your care, things like that. Always vague, always safe. Did you ever question it, I asked. Her head snapped up. Of course I did, she said. But he said she was helping. I studied her carefully. Because beneath the defensiveness, there were cracks, small ones, but real. You trust him, I said softly. She nodded. He's my father, and I'm your mother, I replied. The words landed harder than anything else I had said. Her expression broke for just a second, but it was enough. "I'm not asking you to choose," I said gently. "Yes, you are," she whispered. "No," I said, "I'm asking you to see." "See what?" she asked, her voice trembling now. The truth I said, silence. Then she shook her head. "I don't know what that is anymore," she admitted. That was the first honest thing she had said. I reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. "Then we figure it out," I said, "together." I didn't say the word, but I felt it. And I think she did too. But even as that fragile moment formed between us, I knew something else, something colder, something harder. Richard hadn't just manipulated documents. He hadn't just taken control of the business. He had shaped how our daughter saw me. He had planted doubt, rewritten memory, turned uncertainty into belief. And that might be the hardest thing to undo. As Emily left the kitchen later that morning, I stood there alone, thinking, processing, rebuilding, because now I had confirmation, not just suspicion, not just instinct, proof of presence, of influence, of a story being told in my absence. And I wasn't the woman they had described. I wasn't declining. I wasn't confused. I wasn't fading. I had been erased. But I was back now. And this time, I wasn't going to let them write the ending. Once you realize people are racing against time, you stop reacting. You start calculating. Every word, every movement, every silence becomes part of a larger equation. And for the first time since I woke up, I wasn't just defending myself anymore. I was preparing to strike back. Judith came to the house 2 days after my conversation with Emily. Not openly, not announced. She didn't walk through the front door like a guest. She arrived like someone who understood the situation for what it was. Serious, delicate, potentially dangerous. Emily was the one who let her in. That alone told me everything I needed to know. Something had shifted. We sat in the guest room with the door closed, my old phone hidden between us on the bed just in case. Judith didn't waste time. "They're moving faster than I expected," she said, her voice low but steady. My stomach tightened. How fast? She opened a thin folder she had brought with her. Inside were copies, documents, signatures, dates. "Richard is preparing to finalize a merger," she continued. "Your company shares are being transferred into a new structure." I stared at the papers. My name, my signature, but not mine. "Who controls it?" I asked. She looked at me directly. "He does," she said, "along with a secondary consultant listed here." I already knew the answer, but I asked anyway. "Clara." Judith nodded. Yes, the room felt smaller suddenly, colder. "So this isn't just about temporary control," I said. "No," Judith replied. "This is permanent restructuring." Permanent, the word echoed like a final sentence. "They're not just managing things while you recover," she added. "They're removing you." Emily stood near the door, silent until now. "Is that even legal?" she asked quietly. Judith's expression softened slightly. "It can be," she said, "if it's done under the right conditions. Medical incapacity, signed authorization, proper filings." Emily looked at me, but she didn't sign anything. "No," Judith said, "but they're presenting it as if she did. Forgery, fraud, manipulation, wrapped in legal language." "How long do we have?" I asked. Judith glanced down at the documents again. "Not long," she said. "The final approval process could be completed within the week. Days. Again. Everything kept coming back to that, time, or the lack of it. "What happens if it goes through?" Emily asked. Judith didn't hesitate. "Your mother becomes a symbolic figure," she said. "A founder, a name, but no real authority." My chest tightened. "And the assets controlled by the new structure," she replied, "which means controlled by them. Them. Richard, Clara, together." Silence filled the room, heavy, unavoidable. Then Emily spoke again. "What do we do?" Judith looked at me. "This is where it gets complicated," she said. I nodded. "Tell me." "You can't confront them yet," she continued. "Not without solid evidence. Suspicion isn't enough." "I have the emails," Emily said quickly. Judith shook her head. "They help," she said, "but they don't prove financial fraud or document falsification on their own." "Then what do we need?" I asked. Proof of intent, she said. Proof of manipulation. And ideally, proof that those signatures aren't legitimate. I exhaled slowly. That's in the office, I said. Both of them looked at me. The records I added, the originals, my files. If anything was altered, it would be there. Judith nodded slowly. Then that's where we start. That night, I made a decision. Not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of clarity. I stopped pretending to be completely unaware and started pretending something else, something more dangerous. Trust. When Richard came home, I was sitting in the living room, waiting. He looked surprised. "You're up," he said. "I've been thinking," I replied. He paused. "Careful now." "About what?" "About everything you've done for me," I said softly. That caught him off guard. "Good." "I know this hasn't been easy for you," I continued. "Taking care of everything, the house, the business." "Me?" His posture relaxed slightly. "You don't have to worry about that," he said. "It's what I'm supposed to do." I nodded. "I didn't say thank you," I added. Now he smiled. A real one, or at least more real than before. "You don't need to," he said. "I do," I replied, and I reached for his hand for the first time since I got home, deliberately. That moment changed something. I saw it in his eyes, in the way his shoulders eased, in the way his voice softened. Because to him, this meant I was accepting the version of reality he had created. It meant I was no longer a threat. Over the next 2 days, I leaned into it carefully, strategically. I asked fewer questions. I showed more dependence. I thanked him for small things, let him guide decisions, let him feel in control. And slowly, he began to relax. Clara noticed it too. Of course she did. "You seem calmer," she said during one of her visits. "I am," I replied. "I think I've been trying too hard to understand everything." She nodded approvingly. "That's a common reaction," she said. "Sometimes it's better to trust the people around you." Trust. Such a simple word, such a dangerous one. "I'm starting to see that," I said. And for the first time, she smiled without tension. But while they relaxed, we moved, quietly, carefully. Judith arranged for a forensic review of the documents. Emily accessed files she still had partial access to, and I watched, listened, waited. Then on the third night, everything shifted. Emily came into my room after midnight. No knocking, no hesitation, her face pale, her hands shaking. "Mom," she whispered, "you need to see this." I sat up slowly. "What is it?" She handed me her phone, an email thread. Between Richard and Clara. My heart started pounding as I read. "Once the transfer is complete, everything moves cleanly. We just need to make sure her condition supports the recommendation." 6 months was already longer than expected. Then, we can't keep waiting for her to decline naturally. I froze. Every word hit like a hammer. The timing has to work. Life after Valentina needs to be stable. Life after Valentina, not recovery, not survival, after. I looked up at Emily, her eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know," she said. "I swear I didn't know it was like this." I reached for her hand. This time she held on tightly. "I know," I said softly, and I did, because now there was no more doubt, no more confusion, no more gray area. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just control. This was a plan, a calculated, deliberate plan to remove me from my own life. Emily wiped her eyes. "What do we do now?" she asked. I looked back at the screen, at the words, at the truth. Then I closed my eyes for a moment, and when I opened them again, I was no longer reacting, no longer catching up. "We finish this," I said, because they had made one mistake, one critical mistake. They believed I was still behind, and they were wrong. There is a moment quiet, almost invisible, when fear turns into strategy, not courage, not yet, just a shift, a decision that you will no longer wait to see what happens next. You will decide what happens next. That moment came for me the night Emily showed me the emails. After she left my room, I didn't sleep. I sat there in the dark, the glow of her phone still burned into my memory, replaying every word. Life after Valentina, timing. 6 months was longer than expected, They hadn't just accepted the possibility that I might not wake up. They had planned around it, built a future around it, prepared for it. And when I did wake up, I became a problem. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I had to let them believe they had already won. At breakfast, I was softer than I had ever been, quieter, less questioning. I smiled more, listened more, spoke less. Richard noticed immediately. "You seem different today," he said, watching me carefully. "I feel different," I replied. He leaned slightly forward. How I hesitated just enough to make it believable. "Clearer," I said. "Not about everything, but enough." His eyes sharpened. Danger. He was listening for it, for awareness, for resistance. I let my shoulders relax. "I think I've been fighting too hard," I added gently, trying to understand things all at once. His expression softened. "Recovery takes time," he said. "There's no need to rush." I nodded. "I know," I said, "and I trust you." The words landed exactly the way I needed them to. I saw it, that shift, that release of tension. Because to him, trust meant control. Trust meant I wasn't looking too closely. Trust meant I wasn't a threat. Clara came later that afternoon. As always, perfectly timed, as always, watching. "You look well," she said as she stepped into the living room. "I feel better," I replied. She studied me for a moment, longer than usual. Then, "What's changed?" she asked, straight to it. I smiled faintly. "I think I've been trying to hold on to things that don't matter right now," I said. "The business, the past, all of it." Her eyes flickered. Interest. And now she asked. "Now I just want to get better," I said softly, "and trust the people who've been taking care of me." Silence. Brief, but heavy. Then she smiled, and this time, it was genuine. "Good," she said. "That's exactly where you need to be." Yes, I thought, exactly where you need me to be. That night, Emily came to me again, quieter this time, more careful. "I don't like this," she whispered. "I know," I said. "It feels wrong," she added, pretending like this. "It is wrong," I agreed, "but it's necessary." She looked at me, her eyes searching. "What if they figure it out?" she asked. "They won't," I said. "How can you be sure?" I held her gaze. "Because they don't think I'm capable of it. That was the truth." And it was our greatest advantage. Over the next 2 days, everything began to unfold. Slowly, carefully, but undeniably. Judith worked in the background, tracing financial movements, pulling records, identifying inconsistencies. Emily accessed internal files, emails, reports, anything she could reach without raising suspicion. And I stayed close to Richard, closer than ever. I sat with him in the evenings, watched television, asked about his day, let him talk, let him explain things in simplified, controlled ways, and every time he did, he revealed more than he realized. "Just routine restructuring," he said one night, "temporary adjustments another. Just making sure everything's stable." Stable. That word again. Everything he said was designed to sound harmless. But now, I heard the truth underneath it. Control, transfer, removal. On the 3rd evening, he poured us both a glass of wine, something we used to do often, before everything changed. "To your recovery," he said, raising his glass. I smiled. "To stability," I replied. He didn't catch it, but I did. Later that night, Emily came to me again, but this time, she wasn't just nervous, she was shaken. "Mom," she whispered urgently, "you need to see this." My heart tightened. "What is it?" She handed me a printed document, not an email this time. Something official, legal. I scanned the first page, then the second, then I stopped. Because I recognized it immediately, even through the subtle changes, even through the formatting, even through the lies. It was my signature, or something meant to look like it, at the bottom of a document transferring majority operational authority of my company. Dated, filed, processing. My hands started to tremble. "This is real?" I asked. Emily nodded. "It's already in the system," she said. "Final review is scheduled in 2 days. 2 days." The word hit like a countdown. "They're going to finalize it," she added. "Mom, they're going to take everything." I closed my eyes for a moment, just a moment, because panic would ruin everything. Fear would slow us down. And we didn't have time for either. When I opened my eyes again, I was calm. completely. "We're not going to let that happen," I said. Emily stared at me. How she asked. I stood up slowly, my body still not fully strong, but stronger than before. "By letting them finish what they started," I said. She blinked, confused. "What do you mean?" I looked at the document again, then back at her. "We let them believe it's going through," I said. "We let them walk into it. Walk into what I held her gaze, their own exposure, because now we had something we didn't have before, a timeline, a document, a deadline. And most importantly, we had proof, not just of intent, not just of planning, but of action." Emily shook her head slightly. "This is insane," she whispered. "No," I said, "this is controlled." She looked at me again, really looked this time, and I saw it. The shift, the realization that I wasn't the same woman she had been speaking to just days ago, that I wasn't confused, that I wasn't fragile, that I wasn't fading. I was thinking, planning, fighting. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. I took a breath, then answered. "Stay exactly where you are," I said. "Act like nothing has changed." She nodded slowly. "And you?" she asked. I glanced toward the hallway, toward the locked office, toward the man who believed he had already won. "I'm going to give him exactly what he wants," I said, because the truth was, the closer I got to Richard now, the more he revealed, the more comfortable he became, the more careless. And in 2 days, when everything he built on lies reached its final step, we would be ready, because they had made one fatal assumption, that I was still trying to catch up. But I wasn't. I was waiting, and this time, they were the ones running out of time. There's a difference between knowing the truth and proving it. One gives you clarity, the other gives you power. And in those final 48 hours before everything was set to be signed, sealed and transferred out of my hands, we needed power. Emily didn't sleep that night. I could hear her moving in the room down the hall, soft footsteps, the faint creak of the floorboards, the quiet opening and closing of drawers. She wasn't panicking, not exactly. She was unraveling. And I understood why. Because the version of her father she had trusted, the man who had held the family together while I was gone, was collapsing in front of her in real time. And there was nothing more disorienting than realizing love has been used as leverage. The next morning, she came into my room just after sunrise. Her eyes were red. Not from crying, she had passed that point, but from thinking too much too fast with nowhere to put it. "I found more," she said quietly. I sat up slowly. "What kind of more?" She handed me a folder this time. Printed documents, internal reports, transfer logs. I used my access credentials from before everything changed, she said. Some of the older permissions were still active. I opened the folder, and there it was, a pattern. Not obvious at first glance, but once you saw it, it was undeniable. Money had been moving out of the company months before my accident, small amounts at first, then larger, then structured, hidden within legitimate transactions, disguised as operational adjustments. Richard approved all of these, Emily said, her voice tight. And look at this. She pointed to a column I hadn't noticed. Consultant authorization. Name listed, Clara Whitmore. Of course. I exhaled slowly. They were setting this up long before I was in that hospital bed, I said. Emily nodded. And it gets worse, she added. She flipped to another page. This one was different. Emails printed out, highlighted, annotated. I scanned them quickly, then slower, then again. Once the restructuring is complete, her role becomes ceremonial. The trust framework ensures long-term stability without interference. We just need to ensure her condition supports incapacity designation. Incapacity, not recovery, not support, incapacity. They weren't preparing for me to come back. They were preparing to prove that I couldn't. Emily's voice broke slightly. I didn't see it before, she said. I thought he was just managing things, holding everything together. I looked up at her. You were grieving, I said softly. You were scared. She shook her head. That's not an excuse, she said. I signed something. The room went still. I felt it immediately, the weight of that sentence. What did you sign? I asked carefully. Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away this time. A document, she said. A few months ago. Dad said it was part of your care plan. Something about making sure decisions could be made quickly if your condition didn't improve. My chest tightened. Did you read it? I asked. She hesitated. Not fully, she admitted. I trusted him. Of course she did. He was her father. He used that. How much authority did it give him? I asked. A lot, she whispered. I think it supported the medical recommendation for extended control. There it was. The missing piece. The reinforcement. The justification. Not just forged signatures, not just manipulated documents, but family-backed validation. Emily covered her face with her hands. I helped him, she said. I didn't know, but I helped him. I reached out immediately, pulling her hands away gently. You were used, I said firmly. I still signed it, she insisted. Yes, I said, because he made you believe it was protecting me. She looked at me, tears finally breaking through. I thought I was doing the right thing, she whispered. I know, I said. And I did, because manipulation doesn't work without trust. And Richard had used every ounce of that trust to build his version of reality. We can fix this, I said. She shook her head. Can we? Yes, I said, my voice steady now. Because you're here. Because you're telling me the truth. She wiped her eyes slowly. What do we do next? She asked. I looked down at the documents again, at the pattern, the timeline, the intent. Then I looked back at her. We finished building the case, I said. That afternoon, Judith called again. This time her tone was sharper, more urgent. I've had the signatures analyzed, she said. My pulse quickened. And they're not consistent, she said. There are structural differences, pressure patterns, stroke variations, forgery. Confirmed. It's enough to challenge them, she added. But we need to present it strategically. We have 2 days, I said. I know, she replied. Which is why we're not going to stop this quietly. I frowned slightly. What do you mean, we let them proceed, she said. The same conclusion I had reached. We gather everything, she continued. Then we confront them at the point of execution. Publicly, I asked. Yes, she said, in a controlled setting where they can't deny it, where the consequences are immediate. A board meeting, a signing, a moment they believed was victory, turned into exposure. That evening, Richard came home later than usual, tired but satisfied. I could see it in the way he carried himself, relaxed, confident, like a man nearing the end of something important. How was your day? He asked, setting his keys down. Quiet, I said. He nodded. Good. We sat together for a while in silence. Then he spoke again. There's a meeting in 2 days, he said casually. Some final adjustments to the company structure. I looked at him, carefully. Will I be there? I asked. He hesitated. Just slightly. We'll see how you're feeling, he said. Of course. Because in his plan, I wasn't meant to be present. I'd like to come, I said softly. His eyes flickered. Why, I could see the question forming, the doubt, the calculation. Then if you're strong enough, he said. I smiled faintly. I will be. That night, as I lay in bed beside him, I stared at the ceiling, thinking, planning, preparing, because now everything was in place. The documents, the emails, the financial records, the forged signatures, Emily's testimony, Judith's strategy, and Richard. Still believed I trusted him, still believed I was recovering slowly, still believed he had time. But he didn't. Because in 48 hours, he was going to walk into that room, thinking he was finalizing his control over my life, and instead, he was going to lose everything, not because I fought him loudly, not because I exposed him too early, but because I waited. And this time, I was the one controlling the ending. The morning of the board meeting felt unnaturally calm. No storm, no tension in the air, no dramatic signs that something was about to break. Just sunlight filtering through the windows, soft and ordinary, as if the world had decided to stay neutral. But inside me, everything was sharpened, focused, ready. Richard stood in the hallway adjusting his tie when I came out of the bedroom. He looked up, and for a brief second something flickered across his face. Surprise. Not because I was awake, but because I was ready, dressed, composed, stronger than he expected. You're coming? He asked. His tone was light, but I heard it, the hesitation underneath. Yes, I said simply. I told you I would. He studied me for a moment, measuring, calculating. Then he smiled. "Of course," he said, "if you feel up to it, if you feel up to it." As if this was still my choice, as if anything about this had been my choice. Emily met us at the front door. Her expression was controlled, calm, but I could see the tension in her shoulders, the awareness in her eyes. She wasn't the same person who had stood in that kitchen days ago defending him. She had seen too much now. The drive to the office building was quiet. Richard kept his attention on the road. Emily looked out the window, and I sat between them in silence, holding everything together. Because once we stepped into that room, there would be no going back. The conference room was already full when we arrived. Board members, senior staff, financial advisors, people I had worked with for years, people who had trusted me, built something with me. And now, they were sitting there, prepared to watch it be taken from me. Most of them didn't even know. That was the hardest part. This wasn't just betrayal. It was deception on every level. Conversation slowed as we entered, eyes turned. Some widened in surprise when they saw me. Valentina, one of the board members, said, standing quickly, It's good to see you." I smiled faintly. "Thank you," I said. Their reactions were real, genuine. They hadn't expected me. That alone told me how carefully Richard had controlled the narrative. Clara was already there, seated near the head of the table, composed, elegant, prepared. Her eyes met mine the moment I walked in. And for the first time, her expression changed, just slightly, just enough, because she saw it, something different, something she hadn't accounted for. "Valentina," she said smoothly, rising to her feet, "this is unexpected." I held her gaze. "I imagine it is," I replied, a beat. Then she smiled again, but it was tighter now, less certain. Richard stepped forward quickly, reclaiming control of the room. "Let's all sit," he said. "We have a full agenda." Agenda. Such a simple word, such a dangerous one. We took our seats. I positioned myself directly across from him, Emily beside me, Clara to his right. Judith entered quietly a moment later, taking a seat toward the far end of the table. Richard noticed. Of course he did. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Judith," he said, "I wasn't aware you'd be attending." She smiled calmly. "I represent Valentina," she said. It seemed appropriate. Silence, brief, but telling. Because now, the room had shifted. Richard cleared his throat. "Let's begin," he said. And just like that, the performance started. He moved through the presentation with practiced ease. Charts, numbers, explanations, all designed to sound reasonable, necessary, responsible, ensuring long-term stability, protecting company assets, preparing for continuity and leadership, every word carefully chosen, every sentence structured to justify what he was about to do. And for a moment, it almost worked, because if you didn't know the truth, it sounded right. Then he reached the final point. "The proposed restructuring," he said, placing a document on the table, "will allow us to move forward efficiently given current circumstances." Circumstances. He didn't look at me when he said it. He didn't have to. This includes the formal transfer of operational authority. He continued to ensure the company remains stable during Valentina's recovery. There it was, the moment, the line, the lie. "And your role?" one of the board members asked. Richard smiled. "Valentina will always remain the founder," he said. "Her legacy is secure. Legacy. Not leadership, not control. Legacy. As if I were already gone." I let the silence stretch. Just long enough. "Then I'd like to see that document," I said. Every head in the room turned toward me. Richard hesitated. Only for a second, but I saw it. "Of course," he said, sliding it across the table. I picked it up slowly, deliberately, letting my fingers rest against the paper, as if I were seeing it for the first time. Then I looked up. At what point, I asked calmly, "Did I agree to this?" The room went still. Richard didn't miss a beat. "You signed authorization during your initial treatment phase," he said. Smooth, confident, prepared. I nodded slowly. "I see," I said. Then I turned my head slightly. "Judith." She stood immediately. No hesitation. No uncertainty. Those signatures have been analyzed, she said clearly. They are not consistent with Valentina's verified handwriting. The room shifted, not loudly, but unmistakably. Confusion, concern, attention. Richard's expression hardened. "That's a serious accusation," he said. "It's a factual one," Judith replied. She placed additional documents on the table. Reports, comparisons, evidence. Clara leaned forward, watching, calculating. Then, "I think we need to be careful about jumping to conclusions," she said smoothly. Of course she did. Damage control. I reached into my bag, slowly, pulled out a printed copy of the email Emily had shown me, and placed it in the center of the table. "I agree," I said. "We should look at everything." Richard's eyes dropped to the paper, and for the first time, he didn't hide it. The reaction. Shock. Emily spoke next, her voice steady, clear. "I found those in the company system," she said. "They outlined plans for restructuring long before my mother's condition was stable." The room erupted. Questions, voices, movement. Clara sat back slightly, then leaned forward again, and in that moment, she made her choice. "I advised on certain structural options," she said, "but I was acting on Richard's direction. There it was, the shift, the fracture." She had turned. Richard's head snapped toward her. "What are you doing?" he hissed. She didn't look at him. "I'm protecting myself," she said calmly. And just like that, everything he built started to collapse. I watched him, really watched him, as the control slipped, as the confidence cracked, as the narrative he had created unraveled in front of everyone. Because in the end, it wasn't the evidence that broke him. It was the moment he realized, I had never been as unaware as he believed. And now, everyone else knew it too. Once the first crack appears, everything else follows. Not slowly, not quietly, but all at once, like a structure that looked solid until the moment it couldn't hold its own weight anymore. That was what happened in that room. Voices rose, not in chaos, but in controlled urgency. Board members leaned forward, speaking over one another, demanding clarification, demanding explanation. What exactly are we looking at here? Is this a forgery? When were these documents filed? How much authority has already been transferred? Each question struck with precision. Each one chipped away at the image Richard had spent months constructing. And for the first time since I'd walked into that room, he wasn't leading the conversation anymore. He was reacting. "Everyone needs to calm down," Richard said, raising his hand slightly. His voice was steady, but the strain was there now, clear, unmistakable. "There's a reasonable explanation for all of this," he continued. "We're dealing with complex legal and medical circumstances." No, Judith interrupted firmly. The room went still again. "Let's not reduce this to confusion," she said. "We're looking at documented inconsistencies in signature verification, unauthorized financial transfers, and communications that clearly indicate premeditated restructuring." Premeditated, the word landed heavily, because it carried intent, not mistake, not misunderstanding, intent. Richard's jaw tightened. "You're taking things out of context," he said. "Then provide the context," Judith replied calmly. Silence, just for a moment. But it was enough, because he didn't have one. Clara shifted in her seat, composed but no longer aligned. "I think it's important to separate advisory input from execution," she said. "My role was consultative." Of course it was. She was drawing the line, protecting herself. "You were listed as a controlling consultant in the restructuring framework," one of the financial officers said sharply. Her smile didn't break. "That designation was based on projections," she replied, "not finalized authority. Careful, precise, distance." Richard turned toward her again. "Clara," but she cut him off. "I'm not going to take responsibility for decisions that weren't mine," she said. And just like that, he was alone. I watched him carefully, because this was the moment where control either shifts back or disappears entirely, and I could see it happening, in real time. "You all knew her condition," Richard said, his voice rising slightly now. "You knew she wasn't capable of managing the company." There it was. The argument, the justification. "She was in a coma," he continued. "We had to make decisions. We, always we." as if spreading the responsibility made it less personal. I was in a coma, I said quietly. The room fell silent again. Because I hadn't raised my voice, I hadn't needed to. I was not gone, I continued. Every word steady, measured, deliberate. I was not incapable of existing. Richard looked at me, really looked at me, and for the first time, there was no mask, no performance, just something raw, frustration, fear, and something darker. You weren't there, he said. The words came out sharper than he intended. You weren't there to deal with it, he added, to handle everything falling apart. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Understanding. Because this was the truth he believed. So you decided to handle it for me, I said. Yes, he replied. Too quickly, too honestly. And at what point, I asked, did handling things turn into removing me entirely? Silence. You're twisting this, he said. No, I replied. I'm clarifying it. Emily stood then, slowly, but with purpose. I signed something, she said. Every head turned toward her, including Richard's. What he said sharply. Her voice didn't shake. Not this time. You told me it was part of Mom's care plan, she said, that it would help protect her. It did, he said quickly. No, she replied. It helped you. The room shifted again. Because now, it wasn't just legal evidence. It was family. You don't understand the pressure I was under, Richard said, turning toward her. I understand exactly what you did, she said. And in that moment, something broke. You think I wanted this? He snapped. His voice rose, louder now, uncontrolled. You think I wanted to make these decisions? No one answered because it wasn't a question. It was a confession. You were gone, he said, turning back to me. Do you understand that you were gone for 6 months? I was unconscious, I replied. You were gone, he repeated, and then he said it. The one thing he should never have said, the one thing he couldn't take back. No one expected you to come back the same, he said. The room froze, because now there was no interpretation needed. We were preparing for reality, he continued, his voice dropping, but still sharp, for what was most likely. And what was that, I asked quietly. He hesitated, just for a second. Then, that you wouldn't come back as yourself. The words landed like a final collapse, because in that moment, everything became clear. To everyone, not just the plan, not just the documents, not just the manipulation, but the belief behind it. He had already erased me. Long before the signatures, long before the merger, long before the meeting. Silence filled the room. Not confusion, not uncertainty, clarity. Judith spoke again, calm, precise. I believe we have enough to halt all proceedings immediately, she said. One of the board members nodded. Agreed. Another voice followed. We need legal review on all submitted documents and a full audit of financial activity. Richard looked around the room, at the people who had trusted him, who had supported him, who were now stepping back. This isn't over, he said. But it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like someone trying to hold on to something that was already gone. I stood slowly, my body still not fully strong, but strong enough. This part is, I said. He looked at me, and for a moment, there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before. Not anger, not control, not calculation, loss. Because in that moment, he understood. He hadn't just lost the company. He had lost the version of me he thought he could control, and he was never getting it back. As we walked out of that room, me, Emily, and Judith, I didn't look back, because I didn't need to. Everything that needed to happen in that room had already happened, and whatever came next would no longer be decided by him, but by the truth he could no longer hide. After the meeting, the world didn't explode. There were no sirens, no dramatic arrests in the parking lot, no immediate sense of justice crashing down like a storm. Instead, everything became quiet, controlled, procedural, and in that quiet, consequences began to unfold. Within hours, the board issued an emergency freeze. All restructuring documents were suspended, all transfers halted, all authority Richard had been consolidating paused mid-motion. It wasn't a victory yet, but it was a stop. And sometimes, stopping something dangerous is the first form of survival. By the next morning, attorneys were everywhere, Calls, emails, formal notices. Language became precise. Cold, legal, pending investigation. Subject to review. Potential irregularities. Every phrase carefully chosen. Every sentence measured. But beneath all of it, the truth was spreading. Richard didn't come home that night or the next. At first, I expected him to try, to show up, to explain, to repair something, anything. But he didn't. And after a while, I realized why. Because there was nothing left to perform. Not for me, not for the board, not even for himself. Emily stayed. She moved into the guest room quietly without discussion. There was no need for one. We both understood. The house didn't feel the same, but it didn't feel like his anymore either. Not after everything that had come out. Judith arrived early the following morning with more updates. The financial audit has already started, she said, setting her bag down in the living room. And Valentina, it's worse than we thought. I didn't ask how. I already knew. How much I said instead. She opened a file. Over the past year, there were multiple unauthorized transfers routed through secondary accounts, she explained, layered just enough to avoid immediate detection. Emily sat down slowly across from her. And Clara, she asked. Judith glanced at her. Listed as an external consultant on several of those transactions, she said, which means she's directly tied to the financial structure. Emily nodded, quiet, processing. What about the accident, I asked. Judith paused, then closed the file. That's more complicated, she said. Of course it was. It's been reopened, she continued, but proving intent is difficult. The mechanic admitted there were irregularities, but nothing that directly ties Richard to sabotage. So close, and yet, not enough. He paid him, I said. We can't prove that conclusively, Judith replied. Not yet, not yet. Those words carried both hope and limitation. I leaned back slightly, letting the weight of it settle. So he may not face charges for the accident, I said. Not for that, specifically, she confirmed, but everything else, her expression sharpened. Fraud, forgery, financial misconduct, misrepresentation of medical authority, she listed. There's more than enough there. More than enough. Later that afternoon, I saw him again, not in court, not in a meeting, but standing in the driveway. I had been looking out the window when I noticed his car, parked, engine off. He didn't get out right away. He just sat there, as if gathering something or losing something. I wasn't sure which. Emily noticed too. Do you want me to tell him to leave? She asked quietly. I shook my head. No, I said, because I needed to see him, not as the man I thought I knew, but as the man he had become. He stepped out of the car slowly. No suit this time, no polished image, just him, or what was left of him. I opened the door before he could knock. He looked surprised. For a moment. Then something in his expression softened. Valentina, he said. My name sounded different now, heavier, stripped of everything he had layered over it. We stood there in silence for a few seconds, long enough for the past to settle between us. Long enough for the truth to take its place. I'm not here to argue, he said finally. I nodded. I know. He looked at me carefully, as if trying to understand something he hadn't expected. I just wanted to talk, he added. Then talk, I said. He stepped inside, slowly looking around, noticing the same changes I had noticed days ago, but now, they meant something different. Now? They looked like evidence. I didn't plan it the way it turned out, he said. I didn't respond, because that wasn't an apology. It was a defense. I was trying to keep everything from falling apart, he continued. By taking it from me, I asked. He flinched, slightly. That's not how I saw it, he said. Then how did you see it, I asked. He hesitated. Then as survival, he said. Survival, his survival, not mine. You thought I was gone, I said. Yes, he replied. The honesty was almost startling. And when I wasn't, I asked. He looked down. That complicated things, he admitted. Complicated, that word again, as if I were a variable in his equation. You didn't come to see me in that hospital room as my husband, I said quietly. You came as someone managing a situation. He didn't deny it, because he couldn't. I was scared, he said, of what I asked, of losing everything, he replied, everything, the house, the business, the control. And what about losing me, I asked. He didn't answer. And that was the answer. Silence settled between us again, but this time, it wasn't heavy, it was clear. "I don't hate you," I said finally. He looked up, surprised. "Then what'd he asked?" I thought about it, carefully, honestly. "I see you," I said, and that was worse, because being seen meant there was no illusion left, no version of him to hide behind. "I didn't think you'd come back like this," he said. "I know," I replied. That had been his mistake, his biggest one. He nodded slowly, as if accepting something he could no longer change. "I'll cooperate with whatever happens next," he said. That surprised me, not because it was noble, but because it was inevitable. He had run out of ways to control the outcome. "Good," I said, and I meant it, not for him, but for the truth. He lingered for a moment longer, as if he wanted to say something else, something more, but whatever it was, it didn't come. So he left quietly, without another word. I stood there for a while after the door closed, not thinking, not feeling, just standing, because this was the part no one talks about, the part after the truth comes out, after the confrontation, after the exposure, the part where you realize you didn't just survive something, you lost something too. Not the person he was at the end, but the person you believed he was in the beginning. And that loss doesn't come back. But neither do you, because the woman who walked into that boardroom was not the same woman who had been lying in that hospital bed, and she never would be again. In the weeks that followed, life didn't return to normal. It rebuilt itself, slowly, carefully, piece by piece, and this time, I was the one deciding what stayed and what didn't. The company was the first thing I reclaimed, not because it was the most important part of my life, but because it was the part that had been targeted the most. The board moved quickly once the investigation confirmed what we already knew. All restructuring plans were permanently voided. Every document tied to the forged signatures was invalidated. Control was restored legally, fully, and without condition, to me. Walking back into my office for the first time felt surreal. The door was no longer locked, no longer off limits, just a door again. But when I pushed it open, I understood why it had been kept from me. Everything had been changed. Files moved, drawers reorganized, systems updated, not destroyed, not erased, but altered just enough to shift control, to make it unfamiliar, to make it his. I stood there for a long moment, taking it all in. The desk I had worked at for years, the shelves I had filled, the view I had looked out of every morning. It was all still there, and yet it wasn't. Emily stepped in behind me quietly. "I'm sorry," she said. I didn't turn around. Why, I asked. For not seeing it, she replied. For believing him, I exhaled slowly. "You trusted your father," I said. "That's not something to apologize for, but I should have questioned things sooner," she insisted. "Maybe I said, but you didn't have all the information." She didn't respond, because she knew that wasn't the whole truth, and I did too. I turned to face her. "This isn't about blame," I said gently. "It's about what we do now." She nodded, slowly, and for the first time since everything happened, there was no hesitation in her eyes, only clarity. We spent the next few days going through everything together, files, accounts, records, rebuilding not just the structure of the business, but the trust between us. It wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, moments where the past pressed too hard against the present, but we didn't avoid them. We faced them, and that made all the difference. One afternoon, as we were sorting through a set of archive contracts, Emily paused. "There's something I need to say," she said. I looked up. She hesitated. "Then I don't know if I can ever look at him the same way again," she admitted. I nodded. "I don't expect you to," I said. "But he's still my father," she added. "I know." The conflict in her voice was real, raw, unresolved, and it would take time. "You don't have to choose right now," I said. She looked at me. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you don't have to decide what he is to you today," I explained. "That's something you'll figure out over time." She considered that, then nodded. "Okay," she said. That night, after she had gone to bed, I sat alone in the living room, the same room that had once felt like a stranger's space. Now, it felt quieter, not empty, just settled. I thought about everything that had happened. The hospital, the whispers, the documents, the meeting, the truth. And then the doorbell rang. I didn't need to check who it was. I already knew. Richard stood on the porch, not hesitant this time, not uncertain, just present. I opened the door slowly. "Yes," I said. He looked at me for a moment, taking me in, as if trying to understand the distance between us. "I wanted to talk," he said, again. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me, creating a boundary, a clear one. "There's nothing left to explain," I said. "I'm not here to explain," he replied. I waited. "I'm here to apologize," he said. The word hung in the air. Apologize. Simple, late for what I asked, because I needed to hear it, clearly, specifically for everything he said. Too vague, too easy. "That's not enough," I replied. He nodded, as if he expected that. "For lying," he said, "for manipulating things, for making decisions that weren't mine to make. Better, closer." And I asked. He hesitated. "Then, for not seeing you as you were," he said. "There it was, the truth. You stopped seeing me before the accident," I said. He didn't argue, because he couldn't. "I thought I knew what was best," he said. "No," I replied. "You thought you knew what was easiest." That hit him, I saw it. Silence followed. Long, uncomfortable, necessary. "I can't change what I did," he said. "No," I agreed. "You can't. But I'm willing to take responsibility," he added. "For what that's worth." I looked at him, really looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel anger, or pain, or even betrayal. Just clarity. "You already are," I said. He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you're going to face the consequences of your choices," I said. "Legally, financially, personally." He nodded. Slowly. "And I'm not part of that process anymore." I continued. "That part mattered, more than anything." "You don't want anything from me?" he asked. I shook my head. "No, not revenge. Not closure from him, not validation, because I didn't need it." "I hope you figure out who you are without all of this," I said. He looked confused. "All of what? The control," I replied. That was the last thing I said to him. He stood there for a moment longer, as if waiting for something else. But nothing came. So he left again. And this time, I didn't watch him go. I went back inside, closed the door, and sat down in the quiet. Because this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning of something else. Not a new life, not a different life, but a life that was finally mine again. And I intended to keep it that way. People like to believe that the end of a story feels like a finish line. Clear, clean, final. But the truth is, endings are quieter than that. They don't arrive all at once. They settle in, gradually. Like a new rhythm you don't recognize at first, until one day you realize you've been living inside it all along. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. No drama, no public spectacle, just signatures, real ones this time, clear terms, irreversible decisions. Richard didn't fight it, not once. Not in court, not in negotiation, not even in silence. He accepted everything with the same quiet resignation I had seen in his eyes the last time he stood on my porch, as if he understood that whatever he had built was already gone. The settlement removed him completely from my company. Every share, every authority, every remaining tie, legally, permanently. The house stayed with me, not because I needed it, but because I chose it. Because this time, nothing in my life would remain out of habit. Everything would remain by decision. Emily stayed too, at first temporarily, then longer, then naturally. Not because she had nowhere else to go, but because we both needed the time, the space, the honesty. We didn't pretend everything was fine. We didn't rush into forgiveness. We didn't force anything that wasn't ready. We talked, sometimes for hours, sometimes for minutes, sometimes not at all. But when we did, it was real. "I still feel guilty," she admitted one night as we sat in the kitchen, the same kitchen where everything had once felt staged. Now, it felt different, lighter. "I know," I said. "I should have seen it," she added. "You saw what you were given," I replied. She looked at me. "And you," she asked, "do you still think about it?" I smiled slightly, not the way I used to. That was the truth. because something had shifted inside me, not just during the confrontation, not just when the truth came out, but in everything that followed. I stopped asking why, stopped replaying moments, stopped trying to understand how someone I loved could become someone I didn't recognize, because the answer didn't change anything. What mattered was what came after. The company stabilized faster than anyone expected. The board restructured leadership. Transparency measures were implemented. Safeguards, checks, protections, not just for me, but for anyone who might one day find themselves vulnerable in the same way. I insisted on that, because what happened to me should never be easy to repeat. A few months later, I was invited to speak at a small legal and financial conference. At first, I almost declined. Public speaking had never been my priority, but something about it felt necessary. So I went. Standing in front of that room, I didn't talk about betrayal. Not directly. I didn't tell them about the hospital, or the kiss, or the whispers. I talked about vulnerability, about what happens when someone loses their voice, even temporarily, about how quickly control can shift when no one is watching closely. And I talked about something else, something deeper: choice. People think the most important moment in a story like this, I said, is when the truth is revealed. I paused, letting the room settle. But it's not. I continued. It's the moment someone decides what to do with that truth, because that's where everything changes. After the talk, several people approached me, some with questions, some with stories of their own, some just to say thank you. And that's when I realized this wasn't just my ending, it was someone else's beginning. That night, I came home to a quiet house. Emily was out with friends. The lights were low, the air still. I walked through each room slowly, not out of habit, but with awareness. The living room, the hallway, the office, my office. I stepped inside and sat at my desk, the same desk, but not the same person. For a long time, I just sat there, not thinking, not remembering, just being, because that was the difference now. I wasn't trying to reclaim who I had been. I was building who I had become. Stronger, clearer, harder to silence. The woman who woke up in that hospital bed had no idea what she was about to face, but she also had no idea what she was capable of surviving. And maybe that's the real ending, not the loss, not the betrayal, not even the justice, but the realization that being broken open doesn't mean being destroyed. Sometimes it means being seen by others, and finally, by yourself. And that was something no one could take from me again. Not Richard, not Clara, not anyone, because the one choice that ruined them was the same one that saved me. They chose to erase me, and I chose to come back stronger, twice. And this time, I was fully awake, in every possible way. Sometimes the deepest betrayals don't begin in a single moment. They build quietly, hidden beneath trust, routine, and love. What happened to me wasn't just about a husband's infidelity or a financial scheme. It was about what people are capable of when they believe you've lost your voice, when they think you can no longer fight back. Illness, vulnerability, and silence reveal truths that comfort often hides. The people who stand beside you in your strongest moments are not always the same ones who protect you in your weakest. But here's what I learned. Losing control does not mean losing yourself. Even when your voice is taken, your identity rewritten, and your place in the world quietly shifted, the truth still exists. And when you reclaim it, when you choose to see clearly instead of comfortably, that's where your real strength begins. Healing isn't about going back to who you were before the pain. It's about becoming someone who cannot be erased again. So I want to ask you, if you woke up one day and realized everything you trusted had been changed behind your back, what would you do? Would you walk away? Would you fight, or would you wait and take everything back at the right moment? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story moved, you don't forget to like and subscribe, because some stories aren't just meant to be heard. They're meant to remind us who we are.